Hi guys, welcome to the Earthly Delights podcast. This week we're going to be talking to a friend of mine from school who's had quite a hard time of it as of late, but I think this podcast is going to be really interesting, and I know there's a couple of people listening who have been wanting to listen to this podcast for quite a while now. I've had a few requests. So without further ado, Tom, what's the crack? How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. How about yourself?
Not too bad. It's a bit of a shame we're recording obviously on Sunday, and the news of Caroline Flack, I'm not sure if you saw it.
Yeah, I did.
Came out yesterday.
Sad news, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's sad news because especially it's fun. It's that whole thing always happens. I feel like especially when celebrities kind of commit suicide or whatever, whereby you see everyone come out again and starting to promote mental health again and saying how we should all be kinder and everything else. But then it always happens. Those same people, not all of them, but a lot of them, then they'll just slate the next person that comes on. You know, it's this whole thing.
That's it. Yeah, and everyone's got their own opinion about it, don't they? I was just having a chat to Emma about this. We were just saying about how everyone has their own opinion on the whole thing, really. But I suppose in some ways it can be positive. Like, although it's an awful thing that's happened, but it can be positive to raise more awareness of mental health, like you say.
Yeah, if it can help change people's attitudes, then I think that would be good. And I think the biggest thing for me is not necessarily the sense that people maybe slate, because if it was true that maybe she did those, I don't really know what happened with her boyfriend, but if that was to be proven true, then obviously that's a problem. But the thing is that what I didn't like about it was kind of, you're either in one or two camps. It's either you love Caroline Flack, in which case you can say that you're upset she died, or you go, well, she beat up her boyfriend, so she kind of deserved it anyway, she's a bad person. And it's just like, mate, we've all made mistakes, but none of us are perfect, and yet every single one of us wants to throw stones when we all live in glass houses. I just think it's the weirdest kind of mentality, because it doesn't mean that just because you've made one mistake, that's it. You're just an awful person, and no one should care, and this, that, and the other. It's just a bit of a weird kind of cancel culture that we've got going on at the moment. Which
yeah, exactly. It's hard to judge people, especially when you don't know the whole situation, isn't it? But yeah, sad news anyway.
Yeah, sad news. Anyway, let's get on with the main topic here. So just want to, obviously some of our friends will be listening and they'll kind of know, but there'll be people who have no idea. So just want to kind of fill people in and let people know what's been happening over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so let me think about it again. So February 2018, I was diagnosed with a brain tumour. So I think initially it appeared to be something, I think the doctors thought it was something to do with my heart. I kept going in with these symptoms where I was having mini seizures, but they were just kind of weird sensations that I was feeling in sort of the right side of my body, and I was feeling them more so when I was at the gym or exerting myself. So the diagnosis did take a little while, but eventually I started to have them. So I'd have these seizures every so often, maybe once or twice a day, but then they just got more and more frequent until sort of the last day, the day that I went in to A&E. I must have had about 10 probably seizures.
Jesus.
So it was quite worrying, really, especially because at work, when I was on the phone to customers and stuff, what started to happen is I couldn't finish my sentences, couldn't finish my words, and that's when I sort of started to really sort of think this might be something really quite serious, and got a bit worried about it.
Yeah.
But still, I didn't think it would be as serious as it was. So we went into A&E, and then eventually they did an MRI, Sorry, not an it was a CT scan. So they're quite similar, but they're just slightly different scans. So I had a
Right.
CT scan, and what they said initially, they called us into like one of the like family rooms or something. So sort of immediately we kind of knew it was quite a serious diagnosis. So they took us in there and just said, I've got basically I can't remember what it said, a lesion on the brain. That was it, a lesion on the brain. But at the time, I was a little bit sort of, it was kind of a bit shocking and everything, and I didn't really, it didn't really hit home at the time.
Yeah,
But they didn't actually give me a full diagnosis of saying it was a brain tumour or anything, because they were going to do more tests after that. But all we got was that it was a lesion on the brain, and I think my mum, being quite medical because she's a midwife, I think she kind of knew what it was. She was like, "Oh, it's probably a brain tumour." So yeah, that was the initial bit, which was quite shocking and took a little while to sink in. And then from there, I had a biopsy. So I went home for like a few weeks and was put on anti-seizure medication, which I still take now. But yeah, I was put on this medication, and then I just had to wait at home for a few weeks before my biopsy. And that period was pretty hard, I think, because, after being told that diagnosis, I spent a lot of time, with family, and Emma was there as well. She basically came and just stayed with me for those 3 weeks. But it was really quite an emotional time. That was probably the hardest part of it all, I think, because you just don't know exactly what the diagnosis is or how bad it is or anything. So you're just like guessing at everything, and
yeah, you're in a complete state of limbo.
Reading stuff up on the internet about what it could be and how bad it could be, and there was just a lot to think about, I think. And from obviously a position where you weren't diagnosed with anything and you thought life was fine, and you just have these little problems that you're going to the doctor about, to all of a sudden thinking, you could have like a pretty bad diagnosis. It was probably the most difficult time. Can I ask you? So yeah, following that, I went and had my biopsy, where they were going to try and take out as much of the tumour as possible. So we went in for before the operation, they do like a clinic where they sort of tell you what's going to happen and prepare you for the surgery. And I think there they kind of confirmed, because I had an MRI scan, that it was a brain tumour, and showed us like the size of it basically.
Right.
And said what they were going to aim to do, and it was quite sizable, but they said they were going to try and take as much out as possible. But obviously the main point to the surgery was to get a biopsy, to get a full diagnosis of what grades the brain tumour is, to see how bad it was and what type of brain tumour and everything like that.
Right.
So yeah, I went into hospital at Queen's Med in Notts and had my surgery, which was a bit surreal really, because I did it awake. So basically they put me to sleep with anaesthetics, and then they woke me up, and I couldn't feel anything because obviously I had the anaesthetic on my head and on my face and everything. But it was just so strange, because I woke up at the point where they were just digging around in my brain to kind of cut some of this tumour up. So it was quite it's quite surreal really, because you could feel what was going on. There was no pain, obviously, because actually inside the brain there's no pain. It's just on the outside, which is I didn't know that before all of this anyway. So yeah, it was very, very odd, and I had to speak to this nurse and to make sure that I was still. They were testing my my cognitive ability and everything, and making sure that I could still speak, because they knew if they'd cut too far, say, I wouldn't be able to speak anymore. I'd struggle to speak. So they took as much as they could out, and then I got to a point where I had like a massive seizure because they went a little bit too far, and the nurse was trying to get me to speak, but I couldn't. I really, really wanted to, and I knew what I wanted to say to her, but I just couldn't.
Oh my
my mouth wasn't moving, and then I just had like a massive seizure, and they knew that was the end of the operation then, so they finished it up, and I came out awake as well, which was really weird. Like they kind of put the skull back in place and stitched my head up and everything while I was awake, so I could feel what was going on, but it's such a weird feeling. It's so difficult to describe, but it was just the strangest experience ever. But yeah, anyway, that was my that was my surgery. So after that, they had a look at the biopsy to determine what grade it was, and it came back as a grade 2 with some change to a grade 3. So there's 4 grades.
Right.
I'm not sure if you know, but there's 4 grades normally with cancer. So grade 1, grade 2, 3, and 4. And 4 is the worst, and number 1 is the most sort of benign, like non-active cancer. So mine was predominantly grade 2, but with some changes to a grade 3. So it wasn't like the worst it could be. So I was quite positive about that, because obviously, you always think the worst, in that kind of 3-week period before the surgery, I was always thinking, what if this is the worst thing, and then, I'm going to die in a few months, whatever.
Right.
But it wasn't. It was a grade 2 with some changes to a 3. So I think it was still, obviously it was still raw and everything, the diagnosis, but I tried to be sort of quite positive at that time and said, it could be worse. I mean, it's not the best thing, but, being a grade 2, at least it's not a grade 4 and stuff. But then we went and had a clinic with the oncology team, so my oncology doctors that I'm still seeing now, and they sort of they've been very good, but I think sometimes they like to beat around the bush, I'd say, a little bit with sort of prognosis, and because I think some people don't even want to hear prognosis and stuff like that. But I was I just wanted to know, and sometimes in that situation, they said they do get some people who are like that. But I just, I really just wanted to know what they thought. And they said it was probably, what did they say now? I think it was like 7 to 15 years for a grade 2. But if it was, because obviously some of it was changing to a grade 3, if it started changing to a grade 3 overall,
right,
it was more likely to be sort of 3 to 5 years or something like that. So yeah, coming back from that was quite shocking as well, because I suppose these are things that you kind of, it was all a bit up in the air, and we didn't really know exactly what impact it would have on my life and everything. We did know it was serious, but to hear that that's on average how long people with this diagnosis live, it was,
I can only imagine,
really quite shocking and hard to take to begin with. That was quite upsetting, that period, probably like one of the darkest times in the whole period since diagnosis, because it was just, you rethink your whole life, really. It's very very shocking.
Of course. Could I ask you about when you got given when you went to the doctors and you kind of just to like go it all back because you've managed to somehow condense 2 years of your life in about 15 minutes, which is commendable. I wish I had that talent. But I just wanted to go back because there's some things that you said and I thought, oh, I just can't imagine. When you kind of got when you went to the doctors and they said, oh, it's a lesion on the brain and this, that, and the other, I think it's kind of human nature to imagine the worst, or at least that's in my nature. If I get a cold, I automatically think I've probably got malaria or something. That's how my brain works. So how was it? The two-part question is basically how was it dealing with kind of your mortality then, when it's all up in the air and you don't know how serious it is, or you don't really know what's happening. You just know that you've got a lesion on the brain, as they've said. And then how was it dealing with your mortality at the end of the process, when you went in and they gave you your prognosis and they said, look, the average is 7 to 15 years? Because I just think of it as when young people, like, we're the same age, I've never once really thought about my mortality, how you hear these stories but you never think they're going to apply to you. And I just always, when I imagine my life, I kind of always imagine myself dying at 85 after I've done everything I've ever wanted. So to be then told, oh, well, that's probably not going to happen and it might be a lot sooner. How did you even deal with that situation? How was it for Emma as well? Because obviously you two have been you've been in a long-term relationship. It's always 7-8 years now, if not more. How's it for you two to be like all of the, I'm assuming that you two will have probably planned marriage and kids and having a family together and taking your kids to Nottingham Forest and all the rest of it. How is it all of a sudden to be like, oh shit, all of those plans we've made may potentially never ever happen?
Yeah, it's a bit, because this whole thing was only the first 2 months of the whole 2 years after.
Oh right.
So it was all quite. At that time, it was pretty shocking, and it was almost a little bit like you wanted to wake up from like a nightmare, if you know what I mean. It was a bit like, sometimes I was thinking, is this real? Like it was just so like out of the blue, except from obviously the symptoms I was getting, but they weren't really like massive symptoms. Like I hadn't actually had a big seizure or anything before I went in, which they thought was a bit strange and stuff. But yeah, it was just a bit, to begin with, it was a bit shocking, and you didn't really sort of want to believe it to begin with. It took a long time to sort of, to come to terms with it. And then after that, I think after that oncology meeting, so this would have been in like March or April time, 2018. So I had it all started in February 2018, and then this was just a couple of months later. But once I'd been to the oncologist clinic and stuff, I think it was quite upsetting for like my like my family and everything, and I think my mum was quite sort of visibly upset to begin with, but then me and Emma kind of, I don't know, I kind of held it together quite well while I was in the clinic, and was being kind of quite, I was just listening to it all basically. Yeah. And then I think when I got back home and we went and sat in my room, I think it all just hit us, and we just, it was quite upsetting that moment when we just realised what this was all about, really. And because you don't think your life is going to be that way. Like you say, you plan for like, you make plans for the future, and you say, oh yeah, we'll do this and we'll do this and we'll go here and we'll, have kids, blah, 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 blah. And then to think that's all kind of all of a sudden might not happen is very upsetting. So that was very hard to begin with. But I think the whole thing's been very difficult for Emma and, my family, because I think it's harder when it's not you, if you know what I mean. When like, because for me it was kind of like, right, this is how things are.
Yeah.
I can't like change things. So I tried to sort of be more positive in the period after that. But I think for other people who can't help you, you know, someone that you really care about, but you can't help them, it's the worst thing ever, really. And I kind of experienced that when my little brother was younger. He had cancer and he ended up having a transplant, liver transplant, and he was, you know, on the brink of death as well. And that was a lot harder for me than this whole thing has been, which is quite strange to say, but it was, because it's somebody
Yeah.
that you really care about and you can't do anything to help them, and it's awful. But I think when you're you're the only one who can change your kind of future. I mean, I know the medical staff as well, but like when you're not in control, I think it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah. This might be a really hard question, but it's just because I only ask it because ever since we found out, you know, your schoolmates and stuff, and we've spoken to you and we saw you over a couple of Christmases ago and whatever else, and people who know you well, whenever people have spoken about you, they've always said you've been really positive about the whole situation, and I've seen that in person, and you know, that's just been the case. You have been really positive about such a dire situation. Was there ever a point when you just thought, stuff this, like, if I might as well just end it all now? Because I think about how I would have thought if I'd been given your prognosis, and I mean, obviously you've got your family to live on for, and you've got your girlfriend and friends and so on, but to get given all of that in like 2 months, I think I can't even imagine how hard that must have been to deal with. Was there ever a point when you just thought, I just want to quit and I just want to give up on life and just end it all here now? Or were you always kind of positive and we can get through this, don't worry, it's one foot ahead of the other?
Yeah, no, I've never really been like that way inclined. I think it's made me sort of value life a lot more, really, and like, you know, like a lot of people our age are just, you know, bothered about sort of like, I mean, I am to an extent, but like, you know, like getting a good job and, you know, saving for a house and planning, you know, to have kids or whatever. Like, well, maybe not this age, but a little bit older. But anyway, I think it made me sort of value life, yeah, like more, like just spending time with family and stuff became a lot more important, especially when, you know, you've been told you're like on limited time and stuff, because you sort of evaluate what you want to do in life a bit more. So I'm more bothered about, you know, going on now that I'm more capable, to you know, go on like holidays and go traveling and things, rather than sort of, you know, getting promotions at work and stuff like that, and spending more time with like family and
Yeah.
my little siblings and everything. So it does change your outlook on life a little bit, but at the same time I have been quite so this sort of period after, I've been on the whole fairly positive, because I'm back at work now, like part-time, and I am trying to get back to just some sort of normality, just to sort of, because it's been a while now, you know, you can't sort of sit and sulk about it forever. You have to kind of get on with life as well, you know. If you, especially when you don't know how long you've got to live, you want to just kind of live it,
Yeah, of course.
rather than the other way, if you know what I mean, like not want to live it because you've got this horrible diagnosis or whatever. But so at the minute I'm just trying to get back into work. I'm trying to, I'm part-time at the minute, but I want to get back to like sort of full-time, hopefully. But at the same time, it is difficult, like you say, like especially with money as well, like what to spend money on, and do you want to save for a house, because that might not even be relevant for me, or should I just spend all my money on, doing things that I want to do, like traveling and going to countries that I've always wanted to go to. And like you said, it is difficult with that diagnosis to really know what to do with your life. But I think it's been a bit of both for me. But like you say, sometimes it's difficult, like for me and Emma, because you want to save for a house and stuff like that, and but at the same time you're like, well, if I've only got 15 years to live, like,
of course,
like fuck it, I may as well spend that money on something I want to do. But it is hard. But and the question you were saying, have I always been sort of positive since then? I think on the whole, yes, but there has been some darker moments, really, because I finished, so that like story I was sort of telling, so I was 2 months later and knew, my diagnosis and what it was and everything. So then I had radiotherapy like kind of straight after that, and that was like 6 weeks of radiotherapy, like every day for 6 weeks, apart from weekends. Right. It's like Monday to Friday, 6 weeks. And at the time I felt, pretty like all right. Like I wasn't feeling too bad. And I was like, I went through like a little period where I thought, well, I'm not going to let this like change my life. I'm going to just carry on as normal. So I went back to work full time. And I was like, oh, I feel great. Like I'm fine at work. And my manager was sort of saying, are you sure? Like you've been, you've had a lot done in the last sort of few months. Like, are you definitely sure from a medical view, like this is good? And I was like, yeah, they just said whatever I want to do, really. And yeah, I was working full time, and then that went to sort of about the end of July, August time. And then I had a massive seizure again. Well, it's like the first one I've ever had. It's the only one I've ever had outside of surgery. But it was a horrible experience because I'd never had like a big seizure before. But obviously I wasn't all right. Like I thought, I did feel fine. But obviously the radiotherapy started like affecting me more by then. Because it doesn't actually affect you so much at the time, but later on you get later effects and stuff. And I just got home from work one day and just like collapsed and had a massive seizure. But it wasn't a great experience. I know that sounds silly, but I mean, it was pretty scary. And because I've only ever had one, I think it made me more anxious of having others. So since then I've always been a little bit more like careful if I'm feeling a bit tired, or if it's strange, but before seizures sometimes they're going to happen. So I've had lots of like smaller seizures, which I have like 2 or 3 times a month at the minute, but these big ones are the ones that are like really scary. So I think I built up a bit of an anxiety about having another one. So after that kind of summer 2018, I started chemotherapy as well at the same time. So in about September, October, I started chemotherapy. So that combined with this building sort of anxiety about having another seizure, I just started to become much less positive. And I was physically, yes, I was less able to do things because on chemotherapy it does get much harder, and with this building anxiety as well, it just stopped me going out so much. And I started, like, just if people were inviting me out to do things or had some plans or whatever, I'd always, like, nearly always come up with an excuse, or I wouldn't be feeling great, or so it just got worse and worse and worse, I think, because the longer you go into chemotherapy as well, like, the more and more and more it affects you. So I had it for 6 months, which finished around like March 2019. So like this period I was doing like not so much and avoiding doing things with mates and not really leaving the house so much. And I think that built up like a big anxiety problem in me, but I didn't realise it at the time. I thought, oh, this is just all to do with like the chemo, and I didn't think I had like a mental health problem. But then I think following that, so I finished my chemo, and then like a couple of months after, I was still, I'm still kind of recovering from that now. I'm much better now, but like the first few months after that, I was probably at my worst. And I think Emma, like I said, she's quite aware of mental health and stuff because she did like psychology at uni and stuff. So obviously, there's much more conversation about it, and she's learned about various things to do with it. But I think I just wasn't aware of it. I didn't think it was like a real like problem, or I was like, no, I definitely don't have that. Like, that's not me. Like, I'm not like that. But I think over time, I realised, and Emma's been great in this, helping me to realise what like a massive anxiety problem I actually had. And, following that, I had some CBT therapy. So we like did that through my, it was like my oncology nurse. She arranged that to happen, but I would have never said to her that I want any of this to happen, like CBT or anything, without Emma sort of making me realise. Because when I did get in contact with my nurse, she said, "Oh yeah, I think you do too. Definitely health anxiety, because I was saying I was getting quite anxious about having seizures, and every little thing from then on, I was just kind of thinking, oh, is this something to do with the tumour? Is this something to do with like it getting worse? Is this something to do with seizures?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
really,
yeah.
It might have been like a headache or a stomachache, just like normal stuff. But I always had to connect dots to make it, this could be something to do with this. And then I'd just panic and get worried about it and not go out that day because I'm like, oh, I've got a headache. It could be something to do with the tumour. And what if I go out and have a seizure, stuff like that. It was just getting quite toxic, really. So after my CBT, it kind of helped. Because at the same time as me doing my CBT, I did... I did, what was it, like it was 8 weeks. 8 weeks of this MOVE project, which came through my nurse as well, specialist nurse. Because after chemotherapy, I was pretty much just like, physically, I was, like an old person, and I couldn't, go out and even walk that far. It was pretty bad because the whole time during chemotherapy I was just, and I mean, to some extent you have to, because it is that hard. But I hadn't done anything at all to try and come back from that. But that 8 weeks, I built my strength back up and built up, my cardiovascular sort of health as well, and that made me more able to get back out and do things, with mates or whatever. And at the same time as that, I was having CBT therapy, so that kind of helped me deal better with my anxiety. So when I was having these, anxious thoughts, it was like challenging the thoughts before they became a problem. So if I had, if I had a headache and I would be thinking, oh, is that something to do with my tumour? I would think it's like like more than likely nothing to do with it. It's just probably a headache. And then you just challenge that thought before it kind of develops into
Right.
something that's like preventing you from getting out, and doing things. And I think those two things at the same time were really good. I always say this now, building up physically and getting better mentally, together over that kind of 2-month period was great. This was sort of like August, July,
Yeah.
August 2019. So this year just gone. And since then, I've become more positive again, I think, because I've been getting out more. You know, doing more stuff with mates, and with Emma, and also with family. Just like getting out of the house, because I think being on your own is definitely not good for your mental health, I don't think, because I had a lot of time on my own. So since then, I think this sort of autumn, I've started going back to work and everything.
I'm really happy to hear
So it's
that.
been a really positive period over the last kind of 6 months. But that sort of period around my chemotherapy was probably quite a dark period. And that's when my mental health did suffer.
Yeah, I think what you've just said is so important and something that I think we could all take away from, in the sense that what you've said is coupling your mental health and your physical health just makes you such a fitter person in general.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think that just counts for every single person. You know, you don't have to have cancer or a brain tumor for that to be the case. I think if you concentrate on your mental health and you concentrate on your physical health at the same time, I think you can see such an uplift in the person you are. You know, I think that this year I made a bit of a, not a New Year's resolution, but just a resolution to myself that I wasn't going to waste any time after work, because I'd come home from work and you know what it's like, you watch YouTube videos and this, that and the other, and before you know it, it's like 9-10 o'clock, then you've got to eat, and then before
you just get lazy,
and then you've got to go to bed, and I was like, this is like 6 hours a day I'm wasting, there's no reason for me to do this. But in my head I was like, oh no, you're resting, and I was like, resting from what? I've been sat in a chair all day, I don't need to rest. And
I think that.
And so I've started since then. I've started jiu-jitsu and yoga, and I've tried to obviously with this podcast, I always try to meditate or do something that helps with my mental health, whether that be cooking, which I find kind of meditative, or whatever it may be. And I just found myself to be in such a better state of mind and physically feel better and just feel like a better version of myself. Because like you said, I've coupled the two things together. It's not one or the other, it's both at the same time, and both are equally important. You know, it's not like, oh, actually it's better if I just lift weights and forget about my mental health. Like, no, you need to pay an active attention to what's going on up there, because it can, like you said, and something that you said before which really hit me was when you got the anxiety and Emma was saying to you, look, I think you might be suffering with anxiety and stuff, you were like, no, I'm not that type of person, that's not me. And I think again, that's something that, I mean, I definitely suffered with, was when I kind of it took me a while, but when it finally sunk in that I was depressed, it took me so long to realize that, because I was like, oh, I'm not depressed, it's just I'm going through a little bit of a shitty period, and that's all it is. But then I realized that actually I was always upset, because whenever I wasn't with people who could distract me, whenever I was alone, so when I was having a shower, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, whatever it was,
that's it. It's when you're on your own, isn't it?
Exactly, I was constantly thinking bad thoughts, whereas before then I wasn't thinking those dark things. Whereas when I was alone, but what happened was I was like, oh, Seb, you're like, you know me at school, I was always the happy-go-lucky guy, always crack a joke, have a laugh and a smile. And it was just like, Seb, that's not you, you're not that person. And then it took me a while to realise, like, no, mate, like, it doesn't matter who you are, like depression or mental health illnesses, they don't target specific people, they'll just go for anyone, they don't care, do you know what I mean? And it's that realisation that you're not immune from mental health problems is actually really important, I think. And it's so important to what you said, is to realize the thing of, I'm not that person. That doesn't actually mean anything, because we're all that person. Any one of us can suffer, and it doesn't have to, I mean, obviously what you've gone through is really dramatic, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic. You know, I know people who they got sacked, or their girlfriend left them after 5 years, and you know they don't know where to turn. Something like that, which some of us might think is just trivial, can really affect someone for the negative. And I think as well, another thing that you said that I just wanted to pick up on is Emma, and how helpful she's been to you, because if I remember correctly, she actually was the one who kind of suggested in the very start of this whole process, suggested that you should go to the doctors because when you were working out, you were kind of suffering and you had like that metallic taste in your mouth, and every now and again your kind of memory would go or whatever. And Emma was the one who was like, Tom, I think you should go to doctor. And you kind of did the typical man thing, which I do, and almost I think all of us do, which is, oh no, I'm all right. It's just a little thing. It's fine. There's no need to worry. And then,
well, that's what you want. Yeah, you don't want to worry about anything, do you? You just think, oh, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the thing again, when you got the anxiety, she was the other person who said, she was the person again who was like, Tom, this isn't just your tumour. This is something actually completely separate, in the sense of it's mental health. It's nothing to do with the tumour. Obviously, it's been brought on by the effects of chemotherapy and stuff, but it's not. You're not feeling this way because you have a tumour. You're feeling this way because you've got anxiety problems, and you need to like switch and confront those problems.
Yeah, I think that was the most difficult part, was just coming to terms with it. I think it is the most difficult part of mental health. Is like, a lot of people think that they wouldn't experience it, and they definitely haven't or anything, but coming to terms with the fact that you might have already, I think that's the most difficult part. I think once you've, you know, if you are like suffering, once you have realised that and accepted it, that's the biggest part of it all, I think.
100%. And I think as well, I think it's especially for men, you know, for us guys, I think it's so difficult to accept, because even though a lot of us are turned on to mental health and we realise that it's a very important thing, you know, it's not as if we lived in the 50s anymore, there's still some sort of stigma attached, and there's still, you know, this feeling that mental health is kind of for like weaker people, and I'm strong, I'm a man, I'm a boyfriend, I look after people, I'm not going to get mental health. That's for weaker people to get. And so then when it actually happens to you, you're like, oh fuck, like everything I just thought is actually a complete lie, and there's got nothing to do with being strong or weak or whatever you want to put it. Mental health attacks all of us. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what age you are, you know, how strong you are. It can attack you from the smallest things to the most dramatic things, like your case. And I think something to take from your story as well, with, you know, your relationship with Emma, is that you relied on her a lot, and that's been a really good thing for you, and it's helped you kind of get through this, to have someone where you can rely on. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a girlfriend, obviously, because there's going to be people listening to this who don't. But whether that's your mum or your dad or a brother or a friend of yours, someone that you can rely on, because you said it yourself, it's impossible to go through it alone. You need that person who can always be there, and if that means you have to cry together, you cry together. If that means you go to the park for a walk together just to get it off your mind, you do that together. But there's always that someone. And I think that's the worst part about depression and mental health and anxiety and all of that stuff, I found, and from people I've spoken to, and you're a perfect example, is once it takes a hold on you, it makes you become insular.
Yeah, it really does, yeah.
And it makes you kind of just regret, not go out and not socialise and not do anything and not speak to anyone and keep it all inside, which is actually the worst possible thing you could ever do. So it's like this disease that once it grabs a hold of you, it makes you do everything you shouldn't do, which is stay in your house, don't go out for plans, don't talk to people, don't do this, don't do that. And actually it's the complete opposite. If you're suffering with depression or mental health or anxiety, obviously I'm not a professional, but from just personal experience, you should actually force yourself into those what seem uncomfortable positions, which may be going to the pub with your mates to watch Nottingham Forest, or going on a night out or a meal out with Emma, or you know what I mean. And in that moment when you've decided to go, you're like, oh my god, this is terrible. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. But then once you're there, you're then like, why was I ever worried? This is the best thing for me, being around my friends, being around Emma, being around my family.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with that.
And how has it been? Obviously, I know some of your friends from school, your real close friends like Matt Hempsel and those guys. How have they been in supporting you in dealing with it? Because like you said beforehand, in some ways it's kind of easier for you because you're in control in the sense of it's your own life. Whereas these people, Emma and your friends and your family, obviously they love you dearly, but they can't help you in the sense of they can't take the tumor away. They've kind of. So how has it been for them, and how have they supported you?
Um, well, I suppose differently to. I think obviously it's very hard for everyone, um, but I think some people deal with it differently. I mean, I think my mum is obviously she's more sort of visibly upset and stuff a lot, and she's you know she struggles to not talk about it and stuff like that. But I get it. Like she wants me to be cured and everything. Because I'm not actually. I've still got some of the tumor left, and so I'm not actually cured. And I think she just. It's very hard because you want to kind of get cured and it's not a problem anymore and everything. So it is very hard for my mum. But I think sometimes it does really, really affect her. I mean, it does with everyone. I think it really does affect Emma as well, but I think she just tries to not let it sort of be the topic of conversation all the time. Don't let it kind of consume you as much. Because it can very easily consume you, something like that. So it's definitely important to I mean, yeah, talk about it now and again because it's not like it's not there, but like I think, yeah, like talking about it all the time and stuff it does become a bit tiring, and it's because there's no actual sort of cure. It's kind of incurable at the minute. It's very difficult because you're like, right, well, let's get it cured, but it's like, yeah, but there's no cure right now. Like there might be in the
Yeah.
future, which is what I'm very positive about, but it's like, yeah, it definitely not making your whole life about that. And I think it really helps with my mates as well, like going out to footy or whatever, or just meeting up at the pub or whatever, just to have a normal chat with them and, like you would, and if none of this happened, basically, it's just positive to just go out and enjoy life and live your life more. Well, especially a lot more than I was. Yeah, like kind of 6 months ago. But yeah, I think just being supportive and being there and saying, "Hey, mate, do you want to, go and do this today, or do you want to, yeah, just like, do you want to go out today? Do you want to do this today? Even just like." Just meeting up, not even for that long, just so you can have a bit of a chat and stuff. And it always helps, I think, just to, if for other people struggling with mental health problems, is just to always ask about it now and again. Like I said, not all the time. Like you don't want to say, oh, I've got depression or anxiety, and then people ask you about it all the time. I think that doesn't help as much. I think just now and again, just a chat with a mate, like not like a proper like investigate, like, oh, what's your depression like and stuff. And I think just a chat now and again just helps, because if you've got any thoughts or something you need to get off your chest, or like rather than dealing with them yourself, I think that does really help. And I think family and friends and Emma have been really good with that.
Yeah. I think as well when obviously we had this conversation, we recorded it like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and your microphone didn't work, so in the end we had a lovely conversation over the phone, but this is why we're re-recording this conversation. But I've got to confess that after we had that conversation, I think it was actually the next day, Kobe Bryant died in the helicopter crash, and the conversation with you coupled with kind of Kobe Bryant. I don't know why, because I don't really get affected by celebrity deaths in the sense of I don't know them personally, so it doesn't affect me personally. But for some reason, and I think it was more to do with the conversation I had with you, I was really affected by it, and it kind of knocked me for six. And I realized, and I kind of reflected, and it was because in that conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, and in this conversation that we've had now, the theme that keeps on coming through is all you want is normality, and you just don't want to take life for granted anymore, which maybe you were guilty of beforehand. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that. And I just thought, Christ, here's Tom with all of his problems and everything else, and he's positive, and all he wants again is just to be a normal guy again, just to be able to have a full-time job, just to be able to, if he wants to go on a run and not worry how he's going to feel, or if he wants to go to the pub, go to the pub, and all of that stuff. And I think I don't want to talk for anyone else, but I'm so guilty of kind of chastising that normal life and thinking of normality as boring and who wants a normal life? Let's do more, let's do better. And actually there's something so beautiful in having that normality and not taking it for granted, and actually taking advantage of that fact. And if you're healthy and you're fit, to be able to do things and to choose to do them, and not to stay in your bedroom because who cares, I'll just do it next weekend, because you don't really know what's going to happen from now until next weekend, and I think that's for me, that was my biggest takeaway of the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, and the conversation I'm having with you now is just to try not to take life for granted, because there's so many people in unfortunate situations who I think they've learned that lesson. And maybe if people who are listening to this conversation, they don't have to have cancer to learn that lesson. If they just listen to you, can kind of take it on board and go, Christ, look, if people are going through this, I should really try to make the most of my life and not take it for granted, and not take the small things for granted, because actually small things are what we miss the most whenever we can't have them, I think it's such an important message that you're getting across. And I also think it's really brave of you to have this conversation and to talk about it, to talk about your mental health, to talk about the kind of whole procedure you've gone through, that whole operation and all of it, because I know friends of ours we know roughly what's been going on with you, but not, some of us who are maybe not your best friends are we hear little snippets, through the grapevines, and we're like, what's actually happening with Tom? And like you said, people kind of feel guilty because they don't want to message you all the time, because they don't want to put you in a shit mood, because for all they know, you're actually having a really nice day out in Nottingham with Emma and Matt Hempsel and all the rest of them, and then you get a message from someone going, hey Tom, how are you feeling? Are you feeling all right? And even if they don't mention cancer or depression or anxiety, that the reason they're asking you that is because of those things, and so they kind of feel guilty about sending you a message. I've certainly felt that way. I've wanted to message you a few times and kind of not done it, because I was like, maybe he doesn't need like this, like I'm just gonna leave him alone. And I think actually, like you said, it's choosing the right moments, but letting people like you know that there are people out there who care and who are actually wanting to know how you're doing, not in a nosy way, but just because they care for you, and sending a message going, hey Tom, how you doing? Hope you're well. Hope everything's great back home is enough,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important message.
Yeah, definitely.
What?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, sorry, no, go on.
I think I said that last time as well. That I completely understand that, because like what I've just said, you don't always want to be thinking about it, etc., etc. But like, I think just a message or something, you don't have to pick it up right then and there, but at least you can pick it up when you want, and that person is thinking of you, seeing if you're all right. And I think it's better to do it than not do it, but I have been guilty of it in the past as well, where I've thought with certain situations where like I'm not sure I want to bring that up, because it can sort of make you feel like it might upset them or be like a bit awkward for them, but I think it's different for everyone. But I think definitely from my experience, I think it's definitely better just to, if you are like thinking about someone and I wonder how they're doing and stuff, just check in and just see. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to like call them or anything or put them on the spot, but just a message. So it's kind of, just so they know that you're there and you're thinking about them, and they can, get back to you when they want to and stuff. I think that's definitely the better thing to do. But I mean, it might not be the same for everyone, but from my perspective, I think that's the best thing.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice actually about leaving the message. I hadn't ever thought of it that way, but if you call someone and ask them, you're putting them on the spot and they have to answer you there and then, and they might not be in the mood or they might be in a good mood or whatever. But if you message them, the ball's in their court, and then they might reply to you in a week, or they might reply to you there and then, because actually just as it happens, you've messaged them at the perfect time. But it's kind of non-intrusive, isn't it, messaging them? And also, I've also thought as well, even though I'm guilty of it, it's such a stupid thought process, because it's like, okay, I don't want to message Tom because I don't want to like remind him that he has this tumour and anxiety or whatever. But then it's like, well, Tom doesn't forget that he has it. Yeah. It's not like he wakes up and he goes, "Oh, I'm Tom Swan. I have absolutely no problems. I'm absolutely perfect." Blah blah. And then you send him a message going, "Hey mate, how you doing?" And he goes, "Oh fuck yeah, I actually have a tumour. Oh god." Do you know what I mean? Like exactly, whatever problem you're suffering with, whether it's me with depression beforehand or you with the tumour or whatever it may be, it's not that you forget you have it. So like that is, and I'm guilty of having that thought process, but it's such a stupid one, because you're not reminding people that they have a problem, you're just showing them that you care. And I think what you've said is perfect. If you send a message, it leaves it in their court, then they know that, and they might never reply to you, but at least they know that you're there and there are people thinking of you, and it's kind of, it allows them to deal with it and to communicate how they want to, rather than doing it in the pub, unless you see that it's that right moment, because that's that they're intangibles. But if you go for a pint with your mates and one of your mates pulls you aside and goes, "Hey Tom, how you doing with the cancer?" That, like you said, it's really awkward, because that can put you on the spot, and you might just want to actually just go for a couple of pints and forget about it that day, and you might be willing to talk to them about it tomorrow, but right now when you're in the pub with your mates, it's not the right time or place. So you're so right. I think I've never thought of it that way, but I think a message is such a better way to kind of show your support. Is there anything else you want to bring up before we get to the end, or is there anything that we've forgotten?
No, I can't. I can't think of anything.
No.
No, I think that's it, mate.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, just before we tie up, then we always do this last little segment that we have with the guests, and I think your one will be especially useful for people, given what you've gone through.
Yeah.
Our last segment is called "How'd you get your shit together?" So basically, I'm just going to ask that question. How do you get your shit together? Or how do you keep on top of your mental health and your anxiety with everything that you've gone through? Are there certain processes that you do daily or weekly or wherever it may be?
Yeah, so say I try to do sort of at least 30 minutes of exercise a day. Like you said, I think you said you were doing some yoga and stuff. It's one of them things that yoga's kind of like, for like a guy, I mean, I know I'm being a bit stereotypical, but like to begin with, I was like, when I had these plans sent on this Move project thing that I got, and it said yoga, I was like, yoga? Like, isn't that just for like old women or something? Like, I thought that's not for me.
Yeah, who do Pilates and do nothing else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so then I thought, well, I'll give it a go because it's on my plan. But the more I've done it, I've got really quite into it, and it does give you that time, when you're like listening to a video, that it gives you like, half an hour of mindfulness as well, because you're not thinking about anything else. You're not sitting there thinking about anything, like that could be causing you anxiety or anything, or you've just got some time where you're just completely focusing on the video and focusing on like where you're meant to be on the mat and everything. And I found it's definitely been good for strength. It's like something you wouldn't expect so much. You think, I've got to, lift weights and stuff to get strong. But it really has benefited my strength. Because I was, at a point where I was like an old person, like I said. But now it's really helped me build up my strength. So I think, if I'm having a particularly bad day and I haven't done any exercise yet, if I was having an anxious day or whatever, or I always try to make sure that I do have that, just that break in the day, just to focus on, even if it's not yoga, just some workout. It's just like it's really good for me, I think, and I do often say this to people as well. So yeah, that's what I would do, mate, to keep my shit together.
Yep. Nice one. Yoga it is. I'm fully with you. It's actually so much harder than people think. I was with you before. I had a couple of my friends who did yoga and they kind of told me that I should get onto it. And you have that image, don't you, of these women who do like don't have a drop of sweat on them and they're all like perfect, and then you do it and you're like, Jesus, this is so hard, and I'm sweating buckets and I'm like really pulling muscles that I didn't even know existed and whatever else. So no, I definitely agree. Well, that's it then. I really just want to take this last moment just to thank you for coming on for the second time, having the patience to do it again and sharing your story. I personally find it really inspiring. I try to like remember your story when I find myself taking things for granted. I think so many other people will do as well, and just that positive mental attitude that you have, I think again is really inspiring and can help kind of keep others in check and make sure that we try to keep a positive mental attitude, because if you can do it with everything that you've gone through, I think then the rest of us should be able to do it, or at least do our best. So I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Nice one. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast. If you have, please like, rate, subscribe, all the rest of it. You know what to do. Spread the word and try to get as many people to listen to this podcast as we can. And we will try to remove the stigma of mental health one conversation at a time.